So now we're going to add and subtract unlike fractions, ones that do not have the same denominator. So I look at number 9 here. I see that there are two different denominators, a 24 and a 32. And there's different ways of trying to find a lowest common denominator, but basically that's what we need to do. We need to find the lowest common denominator that both 24 and 32 go into. So one of the ways of doing that is to create factor trees for both of them. So if I look at 24 and I look at 32, I'm going to break them down into their prime factors. So if I look at 24, I think about two numbers that multiply to get 24. I could use 1 and 24, but that doesn't break it down anymore. I could use 2 and 12. It's probably the fastest way is to try to find the numbers that are closest together that multiply to get 24, although it doesn't have to. I could use 2 and 12 in this case here. I could use 8 and 3, but I'm going to do 6 and 4. Those numbers are closer together than 8 and 3, and oftentimes when I choose the ones that are closer together, my factor tree is going to be a little bit shorter. It's going to be a little bit less work to do. All right, so now what multiplies to get 6? I'm going to break that down into 2 times 3. What breaks down to get 4 is 2 times 2. All right, so if I look at all of these now going across, I have three 2's and a 3 make up 24. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing for 32. Okay, so 32, the two factors that are closest together that I can come up with are 8 times 4. 8 can break down into 4 times 2. And 4 is 2 times 2. The 4 can go a little bit further to 2 times 2, and then I can just bring down the rest of the 2's, and I end up with 5 2's being multiplied together. Okay, so once I do this is where it gets a little bit tricky. And what I need is, in order to find the lowest common denominator, all of these factors need to go in to the lowest common denominator, and in order to do that, I basically have to decide. So if I look at, for instance, I look at the 3's and I see, hey, there's actually 1 3 on this side here, and that has to go into the lowest common denominator. And I also look at the 2's, and interesting, I have 3 2's in that that are factors of 24, but 32 has 5 2's. So one of the ways that I think about this is I think about which one has the most number of 2's, and the 32 does. So I'm going to circle all the 2's in 32. Now, because I'm including 5 2's into the lowest common denominator, I don't have to worry about the other 3 2's. These ones here I can ignore because this one already has 5 2's. 3 2's go into 5 2's, so I don't have to worry about those 2's. So now I'm just worrying about the ones that are circled now to get my lowest common denominator. I'm just going to multiply those numbers together. Well, I know in this case here that the 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 32. That's where it came from. And I just have to multiply that by the 1 3 that's here. So the lowest common denominator is simply going to be the 32, which is all of these multiplied together, times the other factor, which is the 3 of the other one. So I'm going to do 32 times 3, which is going to give me 96. That is the lowest common denominator. All right, so once again, just a quick review here. I use the factor trees. I circle the greatest number of each factor, and if they're equal, for instance, if this one had 5 2's and the other one had 5 2's, I would just circle the 5 2's once. The other 5 2's are going to go into that one, so I don't have to worry about that. Multiply those circled numbers to get the least common denominator, in which case this time I got 96. All right, and now we are going to, now that we know the lowest common denominator, we are going to try to convert 1 over 24 and 3 over 32 into, so that they have a denominator, so that they both have a common denominator of 96. Well, 32, we already know actually from what I just multiplied that 32 times 3 is 96. So this bottom one here, I'm going to multiply times 3. 32 times 3 equals 96, which means I have to do the same thing to the numerator, 32 times 3, and that gives me 9 out of 96. What do I have to get 24 to 96? Well, a lot of times I can use these factors. I know that this one had 3 2s, 1, 2, 3, and really we know that this one had 2 more 2s, the other one. So I'm actually going to guess that this one's going to need 2 more 2s, or 4, to get there, to find out what I multiply to get that common denominator. So I'm going to do 24 times 4, and sure enough, 4 times 4 is 16, 20 times 4 is 80, 80 plus 16 is 96. That does work. Okay, so I've got 4 out of 96. Now I can add these two together. The 4 out of 96 plus the 9 out of 96 ends up giving me 13 out of 96. And that is, it cannot be simplified, so that is my answer. So sometimes finding the lowest common denominator or least common multiple of two numbers is easier than that. Sometimes you can just look at the numbers, and some people are pretty good at finding that. You don't have to go through the procedure that we just went through every time. You may look at the numbers 6 and 8 and be able to say, oh, the lowest common denominator there is 24. I know both 6 and 8 go into 24, and that's okay. You don't have to go through that whole procedure. Now, I do say that a lot of people, a mistake that a lot of people do is that they look at 6 and 8 and they just multiply those numbers together, 6 and 8, and they say, oh, the lowest common denominator least common multiple is 48. And that is a common multiple. It is a common denominator, but it is not the least common multiple. And oftentimes you're making your life more difficult by having to create big numbers to do that. So it's always easier to do the lower ones. So I'm going to have you guys go ahead, and we already know the answer is 24 here. I just said that, but I do want to practice one more time. Have you guys practice doing your factor tree and deciding see what you do to get that answer 24. Go ahead and try that. I think I forgot to mention in the previous problem in number 10 that we're taking our factor tree is breaking down these numbers into their prime factors. So 6, its prime factors are 2 times 3, and 8, even though it has factors of 4 times 2, its prime factors are 2 times 2 times 2. We break them down, the prime ones that are only divisible by themselves, and 1. Okay, so the least common multiple of this one, again, I'm going to circle the most number of 2s. We've got 3 2s, and the most 3s, we've got 1 3. So it's going to be 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8 times 3. 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 is the least common multiple or least common denominator, and that is going to be 8 times 3, which is 24. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to try to do the least common multiple of 30 and 24 now, getting a little practice on that. So in this case here, I broke them down into their prime factors. In the 24, I circled that there were 3 2s. And I didn't need to include the 2 in the 30 because I know that 2 will go into the other 3 2s. I knew that I had 1 5. And interesting enough, they both have a 3. So I'm just going to pick it in one of them. I know if I pick one of the 3s, I don't have to use the other one because that 1 3 can go into the other group's 3. So now I know that 3 times 2 times 2 times 2 is the whole thing on the right there, which is 24. And I'm going to be multiplying it by, so this, I know this is 24, and I'm going to be multiplying that by the 5. So I'm going to do 24 times 5, and that is going to be, let's see, 20 times 5 is 100, 4 times 5 is 20. Add those two together, I get 120 is my least common multiple. So now that's basically it, but you're going to need some practice here. So I'm going to ask you to do these one at a time and then check with me after each one. So I'm going to ask you to do 13 right now and then check to see how you've done. So just a quick explanation here. Once I find the lowest common multiple or the greatest common denominator, I knew it was 120, and I did the work over here again, but we already knew that from the last problem. how do I know what to multiply the 30 by here and the 24 by here to get that? Well, this 24 over here, we know what's the factor that it's missing that multiply to get 120. It was missing that 5, so I need to multiply it by 5 over 5 here. And the other one, we know that this one had 1, 2, and it was missing another 2 2's. So basically, we know it needs to be multiplied by a factor of 4. So 30 times the 4 over 4, and that's going to give us those numbers. Then we add them up. Okay, let's go ahead and try it. 14 is a little bit easier than this one. Find the least common multiple or lowest common denominator, and then add those together. You may have noticed by now that I've lined up, when I line up my fractions to add together, I do it vertically. And I'm talking about this right now because I realize I've run out of space when I try to add my 4/24 and 9/24. So I'm going to basically have to put it over here. But I do really recommend that you line these up vertically and not horizontally. People make so many mistakes doing it horizontally. It's a lot easier, particularly when you get into the mixed fractions mixed numbers that we have down below. So 4/24 plus 9/24 is 13/24. Okay, let's go ahead and try 15. In this one, I just want to remind you that there are a couple of curveballs in here. First of all, the part where we saw the fraction was subtracting a negative here, so it was minus a minus. Remember that subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding a positive, which is why I just changed that to addition. Minus a minus is plus, okay? The second part is when I had a minus 16 adding to a positive 9/24, so that they're going in different directions. Remember, this is like having 16 holes here. This one's 16 holes, and this one is 9 piles. So 9 of those piles fill up 16 of those holes, leaving only 7 of those holes left, which is why I get the -7 out of 24. Okay, this last one, number 16, I'm going to ask you to add these numbers together. Remember that one of them's negative and one of them's positive, which means they're going in opposite directions, which makes this basically a subtraction problem. Remember from the last video, I showed you 4 different ways of doing a problem like this. This one just has the added twist of we need to get a common denominator first, but try one of those techniques that worked for you on the last one. So once again, I did this 4 different ways here. Each time I came up with -1 and 7/18. Hopefully you got that with one of the ways. If not, you might want to try to change your method to one of them. I also used a number line as one of my methods here. I started down here at -6 and 9/18, or sorry, -6 and 4/18 right there. I added 1, I added 2, I added 3, I added 4, and then I had to add another 15/18 here. When I added that 15/18, it's going to be that 15/18 starts off with the 4/18 that we had in that little piece there. We're going to add it to, since 4 plus 11 is 15, we had to add in another 11/18 there. And if this side makes up 11/18, then the part that I wrote in yellow must be 18/18 minus 11/18, which is 7/18. That means we are now here, which is where we're at our answer here, that we are now at -1. Here's the -1, and another 7/18 there. So it's -1 and 7/18. Probably not the easiest one to do on the number line. There are 4 different ways of doing this, though. You get to choose which one you want. Okay, so here's 4 different ways of coming up with the same answer of -1 and 7/18. Take a look at these 4 different ways. Hopefully you got one of them. I do want to point out that this is probably the hardest thing. This is the hardest problem that we're doing in this unit. If you can do this, then you're doing great. This one has a lot of different challenges to it. So if you're not quite there yet, just keep working on it. But this is basically as hard as it gets. If you're getting this, then you're going to do very well in this unit. If you're not, it doesn't mean that you won't do well in this unit. It just means that you haven't put it all together yet.